and welcome to Manipal Dubai TV. We are here at the Sharjah International Book Fair to meet the famous author of the Star Wars and Evernight series, Claudia Gray. A Million Worlds with You is the final installment in the Firebird series. What do you think that the reader should expect when they read this final book?
Wow. They're probably expecting me to get Marguerite out of the trouble she's in because, wow, is she in a lot of trouble at the end of that book. And, of course, they want to see some resolution for what happened to Paul after he had this terrible thing in 10,000 Skies Above You. And, of course, how do you wrap it up? How do you wrap up an infinite story? This is a question I had to ask myself many times because it wasn't easy. But hopefully it's a really satisfying conclusion. I've been really happy with the response from the first readers.
So yeah, I hope it will have a good bang. And
Where else?
yeah, yeah. So also the Marguerite in the series, she's jumping through different dimensions, right? So how exactly did you come up? Because Evernight series and stuff were about vampires and Star Wars, obviously. So how did you come up with the idea of different dimensions where the same character had alternative personalities?
That's a really good question. I actually was on a book tour with Dan Wells and Lauren Oliver, who I believe came to this fair a couple of years ago. And it was one of these book tours where we would be in New York one day, and then we were in Miami, and then we were in Minnesota, and then we were in Atlanta. And every single day, it was like completely different surroundings, completely different climate, but the same people were always there. And something about the idea of same people, different worlds started to turn over in my mind. Like, okay, all right, how would that work? And it just sort of caught fire in my brain, I have to say. It took over immediately. I never seized on an idea that fast before. But
between the two, fantasy and science fiction, what do you think is more easier to continue in terms of sequels and trilogies when it comes to these genres?
Yeah, that's tricky because fantasy is easier to work with in the beginning because things can work the way you want them to work. So science, even if it's fantasy science, it has to feel like science. There have to be real limits and you can't get around them ever, ever, ever. And I hadn't realized how difficult that was to do until the first time I was like, oh, that is not as easy as magic. Oh, no. But that said, I've actually, with science fiction, wound up coming up with more complications, like more twists with it. I think fantasy is easier to generate the world to begin with, and I think science fiction maybe gives you a little bit more longevity, but that's for me. Different writers might have different things for them, yeah.
Finally, I want to ask you, do you always write the story with the end in mind? Do you always begin a story with the end in mind?
Yes, when I outline, I always want to have a really good ending. I tend to fall in love with my endings, and since I write straightforward, that becomes the carrot on the stick. I have to be good and I have to write the whole thing so I can get to write this really cool scene at the end.
All right, that's it. Thank you so much for having us here. It was an honor. For updates, follow our blogs, podcasts, and Manipal Dubai TV. With camera person Kanchan Meghchani, this is Ameena Nawab signing off for Manipal Dubai TV.